This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks held at near two-month lows today. There seems to be no signs of reprieve as investors continue to worry about the economic hit from the coronavirus outbreak. Now, in China, the benchmark Shanghai Composite Index slid about 8% on the day. MSCI's index for emerging market equities did fall about 0.8%, declining for the 8th straight day. On the continent, South Africa's JSE All Share was little changed today. Nigeria's NSE All Share slid over 1%. It was dragged down as oil and gas firm Forte Oil and FMCG company Cadbury both slipped almost 10% on the day. Now, of course, we have lots more coming up on the show for you today, but let's kick off the show in South Africa, where, of course, a new venture could push down power prices. That is, of course, according to the country's mineral resources and energy minister. Now, Gwede Mantashe wants the government to establish a new entity that he claims could reduce the nation's reliance on the struggling state power utility. According to Mantashe, the new venture would ideally be a partnership between the government and private investors. It will use a range of technologies, including gas, solar power, and clean coal. Now, the utility Eskom generates more than 90% of South Africa's power, but the electricity firm has been described as the most serious risk to Africa's most industrialized nation.
Companies are now going to be afforded with an opportunity to self-generate energy for themselves. I must also indicate that we have started some time ago with mining companies. 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with BBC and Busa Business in South Africa and Black Business Council, where we deliberated on this matter of energy. And so mining companies are quite excited with the strategy that the minister has implemented.
Few of them have the balance sheet to do it, and they have the need to do it. But we've seen some very large mining companies here, it's too late. They were happy to do it 10, 15 years ago, but it's too late for them. Now they're just running their assets down and or selling their assets. So we got to get rid of this draconian legislation today so that the few mining companies that do want to stay here and have strong balance sheets, they can show how quick, how well, how easy to build these power plants.
Well, staying in South Africa, government ministers and CEOs have descended on Cape Town for the 2020 Investing in Africa Mining Indaba meeting. Now, this year's conference comes as global investors shift away from heavy industry in favor of cleaner sectors. This means mining firms face the reality of losing billions in financing, a rise in the cost of capital, and, of course, jeopardizing projects unless they adopt. For instance, in Africa, the continent's biggest coal producer, South Africa, is seeing its funds dry up. Local lender Nedbank has stopped funding coal-related projects in the country, while rival FirstRand has cut greenfield thermal coal projects to less than 0.5% of its lending. Now, as a result, this week in Cape Town, the key focus will be making the mining industry more sustainable. Now, as cities age, buildings deteriorate and become overcrowded. As a result, regeneration has been accomplished in many cities of the world, including in South Africa. CGTN's Angelo Coppola now explores how one Johannesburg-based firm is helping entrepreneurs from all walks of life in refurbishing their inner cities.
One operator in Johannesburg is proving that theory, and a major South African bank is continuing its investment with them. The TUHF has secured another $50 million investment from Standard Bank through the bank's securitized warehouse financing facilities. The relationship there goes back 15 years.
There aren't any financial institutions doing what we're doing. We're focusing on the inner city, providing property loans to up-and-coming entrepreneurs that are looking to grow the inner city. So there's a social aspect to it, there's job creation, but also the final product is affordable housing to a layman on the street in the inner city. So there's the urbanization aspect of it as well.
It's about repurposing buildings for that rush of people that are coming into the big cities to come and live here. And it's working very well in pockets.
What we're focusing on now is how not to have those buildings as islands, but to focus on a precinct approach to development and try and get the streets to be walkable around our buildings so that the urban environment is safe and clean. And I think we're going to start focusing more and more on how to create ownership for families in cities and to deliver in partnership things like social amenity, parks, more schools, that kind of thing.
As much as we do social impact sort of funding, we actually offer our investors good returns. So we're not going in to say, well, we're actually looking for sub-return on the money that you're giving us. The terms are completely commercial. We just have a final product that has a huge social impact.
Business owners and property owners in the CBD are starting to put their money where their mouths are and starting to renovate buildings so that they can start generating some revenue for themselves. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now in Zimbabwe, Finance Minister Mthuli Ncube has set aside $8 billion to improve the country's electricity supply. Ncube says the funds will go towards the importation of energy amongst a raft of measures he has taken to stabilize the country's economy. Now his remarks come at a time when the Southern African nation is battling for survival. At the moment, Zimbabweans are bearing the brunt of the worst economic crisis in a decade, with shortages of foreign currency, fuel, power, as well as medicines in the country. The crisis has been worsened by a drought that has left more than half of the population in need of food aid. It has also forced the government to scramble for scarce dollars to import grain. Well, let's head to China now, where the death toll from the coronavirus continues to increase. It now stands at over 360. But officials are saying that many people are recovering. Almost 550 people have overcome their symptoms. Now, China has recorded more than 17,000 confirmed cases of the virus, and nearly 150,000 others are under observation. There are 153 cases outside China. This weekend, the Philippines reported the first death outside China, a Chinese national from Wuhan. Meanwhile, patients are being moved to Wuhan's newest hospital. After working around the clock for 9 days, construction has finally been finished on Huoshenshan. Several ambulances are carrying a first batch of about 50 patients to the new hospital. Our reporter Tangbo rode with the paramedics.
Now, we have with us right now in the ambulance, in the van, Dr. Jin from Wuhan's Emergency Medical Center, and she is going to help with transporting those infected patients from the center hospital of Wuhan to Huoshenshan Hospital. And she is one of those who have been having a very close contact with those mildly and severely infected patients. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. The very first question is that I noticed that you have been one of the oldest working staff from the emergency center who has been working on the front line of combating the epidemic. So what has made you decided to do it, to continue to work on it?
After the epidemic broke out in Wuhan, me as a doctor, I wasn't thinking about my age, whether I'm old or not. It's rather my responsibility.
Of these two new facilities help relieve the burden of the current 23 designated hospitals in the city. And what does she feel about it?
After the breakout, measures have been taken, including the construction of the Huoshenshan and Leishenshan Hospital. I think they certainly will ease the current situation, which provide more facilities for patients in need, and they will receive good treatment.
So right now, the hospital of Huoshenshan Hospital has been taken over by the People's Liberation Army on Sunday morning. Currently, 1,400 military medical personnel has been evaluating the environment of the hospital, their working environment and treating environment. And they are trying to figure out, have a very thorough understanding of the facilities of the hospital, so that to figure out when and how they're going to transport those 50 patients from different hospitals across the city to Huoshenshan Hospital.
Now, about 10 million masks arrived in Shanghai last week to protect people against the virus. The city's Commerce Commission urged manufacturers to cancel the holiday break and resume production as soon as possible. CGTN's UN visited one of those firms.
All the city's 17 mask manufacturers are now back at work. And despite the fact that 5 of them used to produce only for overseas customers, they're now all working for Shanghai. Shanghai Daishin Mask is one of them. The company is now in what it calls emergency production. 20% of its employees are from Shanghai, and they've been back at work for over a week, with the remainder on urgent recall. Daishin says it will be at full production by tomorrow. Because of the outbreak, the company has been shifting its focus from exports to domestic needs. It has beefed up its daily capacity from 30,000 to nearly 100,000 masks over the past 10 days, and estimates a daily production volume of 250,000 masks once all the employees return to work. The company has promised to sell all its masks at a standard price, and says its suppliers are cooperating with the effort.
我们进的都是老客户、老的合作单位，所以都没涨涨。
Our material suppliers haven't raised their prices at all. That's why we can sell the masks at the same price as they used to go for. Government staff come to pick them up, so we don't have to worry about logistics. If there's a problem in that, we can deliver ourselves as well. We have delayed our overseas orders for a dozen clients. They are all fine with it.
有10几个客户要走货，我们跟他们商量，都得到他们的同意。
The masks are distributed through pharmacies and hospitals. Pharmacies in the city have come up with different approaches to avoid overpurchasing and hoarding. Some are dividing customers into groups and limiting their purchases, while others ask customers to book a purchase number online first. The city's daily production capacity is expected to reach 4 million masks. One government official said local residents' needs come first.
目前来讲，全部进入零售的渠道。
All the masks will go to retail channels for our residents. We are issuing from inventory and supplies of newly made masks at the same time, and we will be able to supply other parts of China once production capacity has been fully restored.
就是国内的其他的一些这个防疫方面的一些需要。
The Shanghai government told a news conference this afternoon that residents can now book mask purchases through neighborhood committees and then pick them up at designated pharmacies. In addition to shoring up local mask supplies, the Shanghai Commerce Commission says it's been working with other government departments to offer faster clearance for imported medical kits. Yuan ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And now to some news just in. The Constitutional Court in the Southern African nation of Malawi has nullified the results of the May 2019 presidential election. Now, the court is citing widespread, systematic and grave irregularities. A new election will be held within 150 days. The 2 leading opposition candidates had challenged the narrow election win of President Peter Mutharika, alleging that irregularities affected over 1.4 million of the total 5.1 million votes which were cast. Now, President Peter Mutharika was declared the narrow winner with 38% of the votes cast. Well, let's shift focus now. Take a look at our corporate headlines for the day. South Africa's Competition Commission has given Vodacom and MTN another month to reduce data prices. Last December, the regulator released its Data Services Market Inquiry final report. Now, the finding ordered the service providers to reduce the price of data by up to 50% or face prosecution. It also recommended that the operations reach an agreement on what the Commission called other pro-poor measures within 3 months. Elsewhere, Zimbabwe Consolidated Diamond Mining Company has failed to meet its 2019 target of 3 million carats. However, officials are buoyant fortunes will turn around this year. This is as the state firm consolidated its investments in exploration, mining and processing. ZSCDC is currently aiming to double its diamond production output from the 1.6 million carats produced in 2019. And a Nairobi High Court has allowed I&M Bank Rwanda to recover close to $1 million from the former CEO of the collapsed retail chain Nakumatt. Creditors in Kenya owed thousands of dollars by Nakumatt supermarkets have identified 11 real estate properties worth roughly $37 million, which are linked to Atal Kumar Maganal Shah and his family for possible seizure. Now, they range from shopping malls to prime land across Nairobi and other Kenyan towns. And finally, Airtel has announced plans to double its 4G network sites in Tanzania. Last November, the telco received an operational license for the 4G network from Tanzanian authorities, for which it will now pay out more than $12 million. Airtel Tanzania is the third largest telecoms firm in East Africa, behind Vodacom Tanzania and Tigo Tanzania. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let us head into a short break now, still to come. African companies resolve to end plastic pollution. And Egypt battles to contain its fast-growing population.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now let's head to South Africa, where the government is looking at a number of policy interventions to cut down on the environmental impact of plastics. The Department of Environmental Affairs is looking at amending the current policies and introducing legislation around plastic shopping bags and curbing single-use plastics. Now, in response, a number of South Africa's biggest shopping malls said they will be adopting a no plastic shopping bags policy across its malls. A plastic bag levy was also introduced in June 2004 at a rate of 3 cents a bag on some types of plastic shopping bags. The levy was increased since then to 12 cents a bag from 1st April 2018, with the aim, of course, of reducing litter and encouraging its reuse. Well, let's delve further into plastic pollution in Africa. We're now joined by Jane Snow. She is the founder and the CEO of Aqua Vita Kenya. It is a company that helps major companies go green. Great to have you in the studio.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
With us, Jane. Well, let's start off with plastic pollution, the scale of the problem on the continent. It's actually a huge climate issue. According to the stats, carbon dioxide emissions from ethylene production are projected to expand by about 34% between 2015 and 2030. So what is the scale of the problem, especially here on the African continent?
So thanks for having me. I think we can't really think of pollution just really on the continent. The concept of plastic pollution is a global one, just as it affects the general climate. So just to get some numbers on the table, as a globe, we produce about 500 million tons a year of plastic. Now, 42% of that is packaging. That would be classified under some of the single-use plastic, a lot of the packaging that we typically have disposed of. 20% of it goes into what typically is classified as industrial usage, such as manufacturing and so forth. And the rest ultimately goes into what would be called utility plastic. Now, the real concern is the 42%, right? So if we continue as a globe at 500 million tons a year, in about 10 years, we potentially could have about 7 billion tons of plastic. The numbers are not as understood on the continent, right? But when you think about it, right, we still do have a lot of manufacturing activities. We are we're big users in particularly plastic bags. Right. As you've indicated, I think there's several countries across the continent that are taking initiative to really start laying out policies. But these are all really small actions.
Well, before you delve into that, it's interesting you mentioned that, because Africa seems to be at the forefront of banning the use of single-use plastic. On the continent, Kenya's done it, Cote d'Ivoire, countries like Cote d'Ivoire have done it. Rwanda. South Africa's making an effort. According to some stats, out of 127 countries worldwide, 34 African nations have instituted some sort of legislation. So is it actually helping us with the issue? And do you agree that Africa is doing a good job?
I think Africa is taking some great steps. Now, I hate to say it, but we're coming a little bit late to the party. When you look at other countries, of course, the developed countries such as the United States, the UK, they've already imposed not necessarily bans actually, but more of a tax. So instead of if you choose to use a plastic bag, you're going to pay an extra 10 cents or you're going to pay an extra 20 cents. So you have an option to take a paper bag instead of a plastic bag. So they're basically letting the consumer make a choice. I think the actions that Kenya has taken, Rwanda has taken, Cote d'Ivoire has taken are steps in the right direction, and they're absolutely helping. I mean, when I fly into Jomo Kenyatta International Airport versus when I fly into Entebbe versus when I fly into Dar es Salaam, I pretty much can feel the difference. That I know I can't bring a plastic bag, and everybody on the flight to JKIA cannot bring a plastic bag. It's a really great step in the right direction. I totally agree. Beyond the pollution, I mean, when you look at our infrastructure, there's been a lot of compromise that has been caused by those single-use plastic bags as well as bottles. But I think we need to even do more. And really, I think as governments, they need to think about policies that are a little bit broader than just really focusing on small items, such as creating incentives for recycling policies within organizations, within the domestic environment, that, you know, when someone comes to pick up your your trash, they also have an alternative to put the plastic containers and plastic bags, so that we really can separate those two, and then we can then focus on some recycling activities.
Now, your company is actually helping major firms across Africa to reduce their plastic footprint. Give us a sense of what your experience has been. Have you seen a will to change? Tell us.
That's a really great question. So Aquavita really is really being a catalyst for us to begin thinking about, before we even wait for governments to take action, right? How can corporations, and now corporations are a really great partner because they employ a ton of people. So when you take a policy of removing plastic within a corporation, you notice that employees often bring that to their homes as well. They begin to get that mindset that we have to take care of our environment. Organizations across here in Kenya, where we've been for 5 years, have been totally progressive. We have about 5 large banks, insurance companies, and as you know, several companies have pledged to the SDGs, those are Sustainable Development Goals by the UN, and part of that is really activities that are surrounding climate change, and removing plastic from the workplace is really a great place, not only for the workplace, but to get employees to begin to think about the environment, and when they see that there's no plastic in the office, then we can consider taking plastic out of our homes as well.
Now, currently, countries like Kenya are employing quite punitive measures. I mean, you can get jail time if you found with plastic. Do you think that is the way forward? What more do you think governments need to do to ensure that both companies and individuals are really taking this serious?
Yeah, so I looked at the punitive sort of process in Kenya, and I think it's quite aggressive. But truth of the matter, I think it's working. But I think beyond the punitive, you want individuals to feel engaged, right? To really be making the choice instead of feeling like you're going to get punished and that's why you're not doing something. So I think policies that reward, right, particularly that reward organizations and institutions that practice sort of non-pollutive practices such as removing plastics or really just managing their waste. Manufacturing facilities are places that, there's a lot of potential pollution that's going there. Reward organizations that are really taking care of minimizing the amount of pollution, or what the rest of the world is trying to do now is to is basically offset your carbon footprint. So you might have to still participate in carbon producing or carbon dioxide producing activities, but then you can then on the other end take actions that basically offset that carbon footprint. So rewarding those, I think, typically works better than punishment.
Right. Well, we certainly hope Africa will begin to pick up some of those. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
It was my
Of course,
pleasure.
that was Jane Snow. She's the founder and CEO of Aquavita Kenya. Well, let's move on now. Heading to Ethiopia, the country is preparing to commission a 245 megawatts generating hydropower dam. The Janale Dawa 3 hydropower project, which was being built by China's Gezjuba group in the southeastern part of Ethiopia, will be fully operational on Tuesday. Now, the project is expected to be commissioned by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more.
The Ganale Dawa 3 hydro project is located some 650 kilometers south of Addis Ababa. The project has costed Ethiopia $450 million, and it's China's China Gezjuba group which has been undertaking the construction. According to the CEO of the Ethiopian Electric Power, Abraham Belay, the hydropower dam is now completed and it will generate 254 megawatts of electricity. The Ganale Dawa 3 hydro dam project was launched in 2010. It is 110 meters high and 426 meters long with a capacity of holding 2.7 billion cubic meters of water. Through the commissioning of this new power plant, Ethiopia hopes to increase its power generating capacity from 4,260 megawatts to 4,514 megawatts of electric power. Grumtala CGTN, Hawassa, Ethiopia.
Is hosting an international forum on the political and economic challenges of the situation in Libya. Experts have shed light on the Libya's war's impact on Tunisia's economy. CGTN's Adnan Shaushi with more on that story.
Experts noted that when Tunisia decided to stay away from the Libyan political scene, other countries like Turkey managed to take up a leading role in the country. This has seriously impacted Tunisian-Libyan trade.
Before 2014, Tunisian agri-food products used to dominate Libyan markets. Today, however, Turkey has replaced us. 80% of the products that are currently available in Libyan supermarkets are Turkish.
Bilateral trade reached $636 million in 2014, against $884 million in 2011. Tunisia's trade volume with Libya reached $600 million in 2019.
Libya was one of the most important markets in Africa for Tunisian investors and companies. Insecurity reigns and the climate of investment does not encourage business in the neighboring country. The situation improved in 2019, but it is not enough.
The governor of the Central Bank of Tunisia stressed the need to boost Tunisian-Libyan trade so as to achieve the same results of 2010.
In 2010, Libya was Tunisia's second client after the European Union. In addition, we used to import fuel from Libya in exchange for other products made in Tunisia, and over 150,000 Tunisian workers earned a living on Libya soil in 2010.
Experts argue that it is unacceptable that Tunisia has not appointed any ambassador to Libya so far, while many countries have created an office under the presidency of the Republic, which is exclusively in charge of economic affairs with Libya.
Economists believe that in the absence of a clear economic recovery plan with Libya, Tunisia risks to permanently lose this market within the next 5 years. The Union of Industry has urged the government to take urgent measures. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, Egypt's population is rapidly growing. It may soon reach 100 million and probably pass that number next month. Now, officials are saying though the population has been growing steadily, they have now managed to bring down the fertility rate in the country thanks to a campaign called 2 is Enough, which is challenging the tradition of large families in rural areas. The Social Solidarity Ministry in the country has trained volunteers to encourage more than 1.1 million poor families to have fewer children.
Many Arab and African countries are struggling with rising populations. But in Egypt, the pressure is acute because 97% of its people live in just 8% of its territory, crowded along the Nile.
So population growth in Egypt is one of the key developmental challenges. The annual growth rates are 2.5%. That might not mean a lot, but if I tell you that that translates to 2.5 million people more every year, that population growth results in 700 to 800,000 young people entering job market every year.
Egypt's 100 millionth person is expected to be clocked up on the official statistics agency's digital counter in central Cairo in February. This population growth rate is a concern President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has identified as one of Egypt's biggest challenges alongside terrorism.
If we continue along the fertility rates of 2014, which was 3.4, in 2052 we will reach 191 million people. Our population will double. There will be an extra 91 million. If we apply more discipline so that families have less children, we can reach fertility rates of 2.1 by 2032. We will reach around 153 million people by 2052.
Creating new spaces for housing, schools and hospitals is a priority as Egypt's population grows by 2.5 million people a year. In inhabited areas, 1,400 people are packed into every square kilometer. Many of the residents now want to move to the new satellite settlements outside the city being built for a booming population.
I want to move my children to a place where people have better social environment, where there is education, to a place that doesn't have negative social elements. We raise our children in a certain way, where we plant in them the seed of right and wrong. Unfortunately, things are very difficult in places like these. So I hope to be able to live to a good social standard, perhaps in the new places if it's made available.
Management of population ties into another pressing challenge for the government, congestion in Cairo, which hosts a fifth of the national population. The government is now planning to start moving ministries out of the city as soon as June in the hopes that this will ease on the pressure. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, still coming up. The British Prime Minister clashes with the EU over a post-Brexit trade deal. And Slovenia's capital pledges to become a zero-waste city.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, let's now recap today's top headlines. In Burkina Faso, a suspected jihadist attack has left at least 20 civilians dead in the northwestern village of Bani in Seno province. This is according to local authorities. The attack comes after militants reportedly warned their locals to leave the area. Many have been forced to flee their homes due to fear of further retaliatory attacks. This latest attack follows a similar one which left at least 39 people dead less than a fortnight ago. And across East Africa, the desert locust invasion continues to wreak havoc on farmland and grassland. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization says the swarms could soon threaten widespread food production. Authorities are responding with aerial spraying of pesticides, but experts say the scale of the infestation is beyond local capacity. The locusts are still moving into new areas and can travel up to 150 kilometers in a day. They also multiply at a terrifying speeds. And the death toll from the coronavirus in China continues to increase. It now stands at over 360. But officials say many people are recovering, almost 550 people overcoming their symptoms. China has recorded more than 17,000 confirmed cases of the virus, and nearly 150,000 others are under observation. There are 153 cases outside China. This weekend, the Philippines reported the first death outside China, who is a Chinese national from Wuhan. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Now, the European Union will offer Britain a close post-Brexit trading relationship, but it demanded tough terms on fisheries and a level playing field for businesses. This is according to Chief Negotiator Michel Barnier. Apparently, or rather separately, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the talks should stick to what had already been agreed in a pre-Brexit political declaration between the two sides. Von der Leyen also said that Britain must not expect unlimited access to the EU market.
There will be no surprises. We outline with the United Kingdom already the future parameters we will have in our negotiations in the withdrawal agreement. And there we're very clear. The draft directives show that also that we are very ready to be very ambitious and to negotiate a new partnership unprecedented in scope.
Well, on his part, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson set out his negotiating terms for trade talks with the European Union in a speech in London. Speaking just 2 days after Brexit, Johnson cast Britain as, in quotes, supercharge a Superman of free trade. Now, he said while the country would not seek to undermine the bloc with a race to the bottom, there was no need to accept EU rules.
Just a few days after the UK left the European Union and Boris Johnson has given his first major speech. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it was all about trade. Boris Johnson called for, quote, warmth, cooperation and friendship in talks with the EU over a trade deal. But really, this was the British Prime Minister throwing down the gauntlet, if you like, telling the EU that it won't be a rule taker, the United Kingdom, when it comes to those negotiations. He also said that the UK, according to him, had some of the best standards on employment and workers' rights and welfare standards, for example, of any country in the world, suggesting a possible stumbling block in those upcoming talks. In terms of the type of deal he wants, Mr. Johnson said he's looking for something along the lines of what the EU has with Canada, what's known as a Canada-style deal, which suggests very few imports on most goods. He also said he's not afraid to walk away if that isn't achievable and settle for something more along the lines of what the EU has with Australia. But this wasn't just for the Europeans and Brussels, this was also for global consumption. Sitting in that room earlier, there were lots of diplomats and ambassadors from all sorts of countries. Boris Johnson said he wants the UK to, quote, become an independent actor and catalyst for free trade, suggesting that a post-Brexit Britain is open for business. In terms of Mr. Johnson himself, lots of characteristic bluster in that room earlier, but in reality, very few details on how he's going to achieve any of this. 3.5 years it took the UK and the EU to get a deal on how it's going to get out of the European Union, but what comes next is the next part of this saga, and that could be the harder part, especially with just 11 months to achieve it and a deadline of the end of 2020. Noe Jabakil, CGTN, London.
Now, for the moment, the free flow of goods and services continues as normal as the UK enters an 11-month transition period. All that could end without a new comprehensive free trade deal, and it appears that Britain would rather see customs checks than follow the EU rules, which are needed for frictionless trade. Europe is afraid that Britain could become an unfair low-cost competitor on its border, and it wants the UK to accept alignment with its rules on workers' rights, the environment, as well as state aid. Britain's Foreign Secretary insists that wasn't going to happen.
For the moment, the free flow of goods and services continues as normal as the UK enters an 11-month transition period. All that could end without a new comprehensive free trade deal, and it appears that Britain would rather see customs checks than follow the EU rules needed for frictionless trade. Europe's afraid that Britain could become an unfair, low-cost competitor on its border, and wants the UK to accept alignment with its rules on workers' rights, the environment and state aid. Britain's Foreign Secretary insisted Sunday that wasn't going to happen.
I mean, the reality is we've got a deal with the EU. It sets out the political declaration for the future relationship, and the points you made are well known. We're taking back control of our laws, so we're not going to have high alignment with the EU, legislative alignment with their rules, but we'll want to cooperate, and that's what we're pursuing.
Ireland's Prime Minister has warned that if this is the UK position, it could hurt the chances of a deal.
Let's not repeat some of the errors that were made in the past 2.5 years. Let's not set
such rigid red lines that it makes it hard to come to an agreement, and let's tone down the kind of nationalistic rhetoric.
It is absolutely clear.
Chief negotiator Michel Barnier is due to set out the EU's draft proposals on Monday.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson's also due to give a keynote speech on Monday, laying out Britain's negotiating position. The indications are he's not about to make concessions to Brussels. Michael Voss, CGTN, London.
And moving on now, Slovenia's capital is considered one of Europe's greenest cities. Much of that rests on a long-term plan to transform into a zero-waste city. Well, CGTN's Aljosa Milenkovic reports on what ordinary Slovenians are doing every day to achieve that target.
Meet Jaka Kranjc. Jaka lives in Ljubljana, and like hundreds of thousands of its citizens, Jaka recycles every day. Do you feel as a trouble for you to do this? Why?
It makes sense, not just economically, also environmentally.
That eco-proactive mentality, combined with political will, has resulted in Ljubljana utilizing its waste like nowhere else. This is Europe's most eco-conscious capital. 68% of the town's waste is separately collected and processed, with the goal to reach 75% within next several years. And local residents are all too happy to help achieving that goal. It's the people who are the key in that quest, not just to clean up the city, but to make it more self-sustainable. Something that town's mayor understands very well.
We started by educating children in kindergartens. We established awards for separating waste. I remember how amazing it was when one kindergarten got first prize. Then those children tell their families at home, "Be careful how you separate our waste." It's a huge step.
Another big step was building this state-of-the-art facility to process all that separated waste. Now, huge waste dumps are a thing of the past. Organic material is turned into compost and natural gas. It is all aimed at hitting the zero waste goal, which Ljubljana hopes to reach by 2035.
Zero waste doesn't mean we'll all wake up one beautiful morning in a world with no garbage. It means we'll recycle as much as possible, separately collect, reuse things that can be reused, and of course, prevent unnecessary waste.
In a world where waste management is a growing problem, Slovenia is trying hard to point the direction in which we all could and should be going. Aljosa Milenkovic, CGTN, Ljubljana.
Well, on that note, let's take a look at how commodities performed today. Oil prices down to their lowest in more than a year, with Brent sliding to about $56 per barrel today. That's over worries about lower demand in top crude importer China. At some point, prices did fall by more than $1 to $55.42 per barrel, which of course is the lowest since January 2019. Meanwhile, gold prices also easing after scaling a near 4-week high. That's after China's central bank injected liquidity into its markets to, of course, help support companies who are hit by the coronavirus epidemic. Also, a stronger dollar is holding back bullion today as well. Well, let's take a short break. Still to come. We look at the story of a female entrepreneur with a solution to Uganda's sewage problem. Now, Uganda, like most African nations, has not been able to provide sewage systems that meet the needs of its urban residents. The problem is exacerbating with increased urban migration. A woman in Kampala has spent years investing in a solution that tackles the country's sanitation problems and other certain environmental problems. Here's CGTN's Beryl Oro with more.
She may be the co-director of a fast-growing company, but Rebecca Okirori is not afraid to get her hands dirty. The environmental scientist and entrepreneur can often be found working side by side with her construction team as they build the newest biodigester in homes around Kampala, Uganda's capital. She co-founded Biocept Uganda Limited 5 years ago in a bid to help her home city cope with its human waste management problem and create jobs while at it.
The waste comes from this side. It's going to go through an inlet. There's a pipe that enters from here and goes straight to the first chamber. This is where the breaking down starts. The waste is broken down from here into solids. Once it's broken down, it comes out from here to the middle chamber. So from here, the breaking down continues.
Uganda's authorities admit that Kampala's sewage system only caters for about 10% of the city's estimated 1.68 million residents. The remaining population, which is growing at about 5.6% per year, have to resort to pit latrines and septic tanks, which create health risks when full and during rainy seasons when they often overflow. They were invented over 100 years ago in India, but Rebecca and other entrepreneurs are now championing the use of biodigesters as a current solution in their country. The unit is referred to by some as a concrete stomach because of its ability to break down solid human waste into biogas, liquid, and nutrient-rich sludge.
Meanwhile, inside the biodigester also we fill in the water. We fill in the water because usually it works with the Archimedes principles. The Archimedes principles of floating. So the waste that comes through the inlet is floating from up, so that the bacteria is able to break it down, and the enzymes, we also put enzymes. We have natural bacteria and enzymes. Enzymes help to quicken the process of breaking the waste down. So added by the Archimedes principles of floating. So as it floats, the waste is broken down completely into water and gas. And that is how biodigester system works.
Rebecca and her fellow founders are out to tackle another problem. In the past 25 years, Uganda has lost 63% of its forest cover. This is due to tree cutting for firewood, timber and charcoal, as well as the growth of farms and towns.
Environment has been completely destroyed. We have a lot of cutting of trees, we have a lot of issues with the environment. But here comes a solution that is environmentally friendly, that helps us to solve some of the environmental problems, like my mother in the village who has been cooking using firewood, and other old women in the village. Actually, you know the problems of inhaling a lot of smoke, the respiratory problems and what. But here is a solution now. We can put biodigester, tap green energy out of it. We use it for cooking, we use it for lighting.
Prudence Atuhaire is one of Biocept Uganda's customers.
I used to think that it would also not be possible using human waste, like using waste to make gas for cooking food to eat. But trust me, I have found it very different, because first of all, we use it to cook the food. We use it to cook milk. Milk is something that is very delicate, that you cannot use anything. But this gas here, we use it to cook the meal. This thing does not smell. The moment you get the waste and you put it where the process is supposed to be, if you get, it is outside the kitchen, remember. The place where you're going to tap the waste from is outside the kitchen. It is far from the kitchen. When the chemical processes that are taking place down there, they are processes that are natural. And the gas just comes out as a different thing.
Rebecca's regular household biodigester costs about $680. The company has already started building biodigesters for apartment blocks.
The future for biodigester is actually great, because we are seeing a very big company that is able to satisfy most of the African problems by I would say in terms of the waste management, in terms of biogas, in terms of many other issues. This will be the solution. So the future is great for the biodigester. I see many people installing biodigester, and I see a solution coming from biodigesters.
Biosept Uganda Limited has already opened multiple branches around the country and will be seeking to expand regionally in the near future. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Let's head to Somalia now. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello brings us the story of Kasim Mohammed, a young beachcomber who makes a living combing one of Mogadishu's more popular beaches.
It's early morning at this tiny coastal fishing village on the outskirts of Mogadishu. 40-year-old Kasim Mohammed, a beachcomber, is briefing these divers as they embark on a crucial task of combing the Indian Ocean for seashells and other valuable pieces of jewelry, including sea glass. Since childhood, Kasim has been combing the sea together with his father, a culture he hopes to transfer to his children. However, his divers lack the right gear for the task ahead. Instead, they are forced to improvise oxygen cylinders and spend less time underwater.
I incur high costs when seeking some of these products. I have to hire divers and skiffs who spend many hours in the deep waters looking for various types of seashells. We are seeking financial support from local banks as well as well-wishers who can support us through skiff boats, swimming costumes, goggles and oxygen cylinders to improve our business.
Maki is one of Qasim's long-time divers and the man tasked with leading the hunt for sea jewelry. He tells me that recent adventures in the high seas have not proved successful due to strong winds and lack of proper diving equipment.
Every day we wake up early in the morning, rent a skiff boat and venture into the deep sea. We spend at least 6 hours searching for seashells depending on our luck. We go out in groups of 3 and 4 every time. Today we were not lucky. We only managed to get 4 shells.
On some occasions, precious shells and other jewelry are washed ashore. Fishermen and local swimmers bring them to this tiny village at a small price. Located just a few minutes' drive from the main city's center lies Jazeera Beach, where hundreds of young people flock here every Friday to spend time with friends and loved ones. It's on such a day that Qasim and his friends hope to make a good sale. But business hasn't been good lately. Qasim says fewer foreigners visit the beach that is less than 20 kilometers from the city's center. However, residents are now becoming regular visitors to Jazeera Beach.
We sell the shells at different prices. We sell each shell at $10 to foreigners, half the price to Somalis returning from abroad, and $2 to $3. We try to target people who know the meaning of seashell and other pieces of jewelry. It can be used for decoration in homes, businesses, and offices.
As stability returns to major urban centers, Qasim says that he's receiving business orders from tourism and decoration companies who hope to use sea artifacts to decorate homes and business premises. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Jazeera Beach, Somalia.
Well, before we go, let's take a quick look at how Africa's currencies performed today. Ghana's cedi has emerged as the world's best performing currency against the dollar this year. Today saw it extend its advance as investors await a Eurobond sale that, of course, will bolster the government's coffers. The cedi has strengthened about 3.4% this year, which is a turnaround from last year when it weakened 13%. Meanwhile, South Africa's rand, after breaking through that 15 rand against the dollar for the first time in 2020, it did remain muted today as, of course, the rising coronavirus death toll did weigh on market sentiment. Meanwhile, Kenya's shilling strengthening, supported by inflows from remittances and, of course, offshore investors interested in buying government bonds. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.